Yeah, shalom, shalom. First, I'd like to give all praise unto Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, and double honors unto the apostles of Great Millstone, and honors to you brothers out there in the highways and the byways teaching this word in all sincerity and in truth. And I just want to look, man, the Lord didn't divide the nations according to continents, okay? You got Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, South America, Australia, Antarctica. The Lord didn't divide the nations according to continents. Pursuant to Deuteronomy the 32 and the 8th chapter, the Lord separated the seeds of Adam and he gave every nation an inheritance on the earth. Right? The Lord separated the seeds. The nations were separated based upon seeds. Ultimately, that's how a race is identified, based upon relation, based upon seed, based upon descendancy. Not based upon what continent you happen to be living in. Because over the last thousands of years, different races have lived on different continents. Right? Case in point, Israel. Israel has lived in Africa many times. Israel has lived in Israel. Israel has lived in Europe. Israel has lived in Asia. But they're still Israelites. Let's look at the Edomites. At one time, the Edomites were living in the land of Edom. Then the scriptures record you had Edomites living in Macedonia calling themselves Macedonians. Then the Edomites started calling themselves Greeks. Then they're Romans and Europeans now. Then Ptolemy, who was an Edomite, took over Egypt. They became Africans and Egyptians. You got Edomites living in South Africa today. They consider themselves to be Africans. You got Edomites living in America. They consider themselves to be Americans. But really, they're Edomites. And their true inheritance is the land of Edom. Right? You go to Africa, you got millions of Israelites living in Africa. But they're not Africans, they're Israelites first. You got millions of Ishmaelites living in Africa. You got millions of Edomites living in Africa. You got millions of Hamites living in Africa. You go over to Asia, you got Moab, you got Ammon, you got Israel living over there too. You even got Edomites scattered among them too. So the continent you're from does not necessarily determine your nationality. And when you go through history, different peoples have inhabited different areas, man, due to migration and conquering and all that, man. So all this BS, I'm African and that's all confusion. Because Africa is just a continent. Oh yeah, our people came from Africa. Yeah, but you weren't always in Africa. Who are you? Look, man, you gotta go back and trace the history. Who are your people? What are the names? Who are the forefathers? That's what's more important. It's African bullshit. You know? Oh, we all African. That's bullshit, man. Different peoples, different nations have resided in the landmass known as Africa. Just like different people have resided in the landmass known as Europe. The so-called white man calls himself a European. He's not the original inhabitant of Europe. But yeah, he can call himself a European because he's living in Europe. But really, ultimately, according to lineage, the seed is an Edomite. All right? So, you know, look, man, let's keep it real. An African is really just someone that lives in Africa. But for the purposes of truth and the purposes of the Holy Scriptures, because the Lord didn't divide the nations based upon where they lived. When you really read the Scriptures in Genesis, the 10th chapter, when the Lord gave the different nations their inheritance, the nations named those lands after themselves. They didn't name themselves after the land. In fact, that's where you get the table of nations, man. That's where you get the table of nations, because it tells you. Let me see where originally. These are originally the Hamites lived in the landmass known as Africa. But then other nations went into that land too. Like Israel, like Edom, like Ishmael. Originally, you see here, the Japhites lived up in Europe. Gomer, Tarshish, Yawan. But then the Edomites went up in there too. Yeah? So, you know what I'm saying? Look, man, we just gotta deal with things in the realm of reality and cut all the confusion. And not everyone that looks the same is the same race of people. Now, it can be a clue, but it doesn't always work like that. That people that look the same are the same race of people. No, it doesn't always work like that. You gotta go with the lineage. That's the ultimate end all and be all of the situation. All right. Now I wanted to get. See, the Lord don't recognize the divisions of the people that man make. And that's why in the kingdom of heaven, the Lord's going to set the people in order again, according to the way he created it. All right. All this confusion is of the flesh. All right. Ecclesiastes 3:14. I know that whatsoever God doeth, it shall be forever. So the Lord separated the seeds of Adam and created the races and the nations in accordance to different men, certain particular men and their descendancy and their posterity. And that's how it still is to this very day, regardless of whether you want to confuse the situation or not. At the end of the day, the nations on this earth are still ultimately divided the way the Lord divided them, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. And Edomites and Edomite, and Israelites and Israelite, and Moabites and Moabite, and that's that. Nothing can be put to it, so you can't mix nothing or this, that, and the other. And no, nothing can be mixed, none of that stuff. You are what you are. Nothing can be put to it, nor anything taken from it, and God doeth it that men should fear before him. Because when the Lord bring a judgment on a particular seed, there's no way you can turn around and say, well, that seed don't exist, or the Edomites don't exist, blah, blah. No, the Lord created the Edomites, and as long as that seed, as long as a father has a son, that seed will remain on the earth, and the judgment that the Lord proclaim against that seed shall stand. Right, point blank, period. So like, cut all this African BS, man. There's really ultimately biblically no such thing as an African. There's no such thing as a European. You got Israelites that are calling themselves African. You got Hamitic peoples that are calling themselves African. So what is an African then? It's just, okay, they live on the continent of Africa, and that's it. But in the purposes of prophecy and understanding, it doesn't profit anybody. Now, when you start talking about Mizraim and Cush and Israel, now you can get understanding. Now there's profit. Okay? So with that, I'm going to say shalom.